I am delighted to be joined by Lauren Kashan of Sharptooth, an owner of one of 2020's best fucking records in Transitional Forms. I've been dying to do this chat for weeks because there's so much to dig into here, and it's a crazy first question, right? Because this should just be an easy thing to answer, but considering a lot of the bands that float around our scene play very, very safe, is your art designed to provoke? Because this is not an album you can put on in the background. It gets up in your grill and demands your attention. Like, is this art designed to provoke?
Yeah, of course. Especially like when you think about just creating metalcore or hardcore music in and of itself, you're literally screaming at people. So if like that, and that act is provocative. So like to, your average layperson, that's going to be very intense. And it feels to me, it's just always felt to me to be the best medium for me to talk about shit that makes me want to fucking scream. So yeah.
That is a perfect symbiotic relationship, both of those things. I think if there's one thing that literally everybody can agree on at the moment, it's that the world is fractured. Right? Yes. Like, turn on your social media, no matter who you are, what your belief, no matter what it is, it's non-stop discourse and people raging at one another. Yeah. So can I ask, what is it like to put out an album that is so headstrong in its convictions during a time where the world is so unbelievably fractured?
It's interesting because putting this album out actually has been like, I guess, less tumultuous than when we put out our first one. And I think it's because that like literally everybody right now knows that the world is completely fucked, and people are finally starting to actually listen when people are saying, hey, this is the shit that we've been talking about this entire time. Please fucking pay attention. Whether that is like Black and Indigenous and people of color being like, hey, systemic racism is a thing. We've been saying this for a long time. Thank you for showing up in 2020. I fucking guess. But like we put out, when we put out Clever Girl in 2017, we have a song on that called Fuck You, Donald Trump. And we have a song on that is specifically about the murder of Michael Brown. And at every show for like the beginning, like that was one of the first songs I wrote, was that one for Sharptooth. And every single show we would close with it for a really long time. And we would end our set before we played it with, or a band called Sharptooth, burn down your local police station. And in 2015, that got a lot of reactions, but it's how I felt. And I'm like, 5 years later, I'm like, I still feel this way. So right now it actually feels like people are starting to come around to at least some of the stuff that we've been talking about for a long time, which is just a relief, honestly.
Mate, that is like, there's so much to unpack there. I've got to ask, when you talk about one of the first songs you wrote, like, was Sharptooth an outfit of catharsis for how you felt, or did you want to be a musician and that was what you wrote about? Like, what's the chicken and egg there?
It's a little bit of both. I have always been a vocalist. I have always sang either in musical theater or like in bands and whatever. Sharptooth, I joined Sharptooth with the kind of explicit purpose of, we're gonna write heavy music and that I'm not gonna be censored. And so it was like the first time that I felt like really, really free to say a lot of the things that I had been hadn't felt comfortable talking about with other bands, or it didn't seem like the right place, and yeah, Sharptooth was basically the preliminary for me joining was heavy music that is going to be about my lived experience. And anything that entails. And they were like, yes, that's why we asked you. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Then we're all on the same page and that's fine.
Like, and the songs themselves, when you were performing them in 2015, and now, like, obviously you haven't got the chance to tour this record yet, obviously. But do you feel that it will have much impact on your songs when you play them live and your relationship with the audience, that the world is more in keeping with your line of thinking?
Yeah, I think that now there's a lot more chance for like actual like social exchange of ideas, as opposed to for a long time people would just shut you down. And now people are starting to, like, forgive like the stupid terminology, but like get woke to a lot of the things that people deal with. And yeah, I think that some of the things I say on stage will feel less controversial as a whole, like, hopefully. That's all I want. And like, that's kind of like my thing is, I don't know, people have opinions about me and my opinions. And I'm like, hey, listen, if you want me to shut the fuck up, just make the world a better fucking place. And I won't have anything to bitch about. So yeah.
I tell you what, we'll come back to this because I want to come back to it when we talk about the record again.
Yeah.
But this ties, two things tie in, because how do you feel about the scene that we exist in? Because, like, there's one thing putting your ideals out into the world at large, and we've all got our perceptions of the world at large. But within our own bubble, within this little community, I think perceptions have been really shaken up this year. So, like, what's your take on having a voice within a place that is meant to be a safe space for views that lean well with alternative culture? Or my take on alternative culture, at least.
I guess it depends on what scene you're even referring to, because nothing I've ever said has been radical in the punk scene. But people have very different opinions in metal and hardcore. And I think one of the things that we like to ignore or like pretend isn't a thing, because we think that these are like alternative genres. What I think a lot of people neglect to take into account is that alternative doesn't just mean left. It doesn't just mean like radical leftist shit. It also means that there are a lot of radicalized right-wing folks in metal and hardcore. Like, that's totally a thing. And those people just really fucking hate me because I'm a woman existing in their space and having opinions. So it's hard because there is this like external perception that this is like an accepting and safe space. And it is so fucking not. Like, I have felt policed in the way that I act, the way that I dress, the way that I produce my vocals for like most of my involvement in metalcore and hardcore. And it's only really been in the last like year or so where I have been like kind of like had to accept a lot of that. There's honestly been kind of a sense of betrayal in a way, because like, to me, hardcore was my religion for most of my adult life. And then you see people in your community radicalized in ways that harm other people. And it just fucking breaks my heart, because it's like, this is supposed to be like, heavy music should be a place of catharsis. It should be a place of self-expression, and it should be a place where you get to feel and heal safely, like through art. And people now, like, I feel like a lot of people, they just care about what fucking bands are on your shirt or like how big your vinyl collection is. Like, it feels so much less about the message and so much more about like the aesthetic. And that pisses me off.
Yeah. Do you feel like that is in any, like, I want to talk to you about the word acceptance there, because that bums me out. if you say a year ago you just got to the stage where you were like, yeah, that's just how it is, like, because your voice is so not one of acceptance, that's why that hits like a Scud missile when you say it. Do you feel like things have changed?
You go. Yeah, I was like,
sorry. No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, so my acceptance of it isn't like saying like, okay, this is the way it is and I will tolerate it.
Right,
this
I see.
For me, been this is the way it is. So now I'm gonna say nothing because I'm really fucking angry about it, and I'm gonna yell at everyone about it. So that's what I mean by acceptance, like the full internalization of a thing. But it doesn't mean I'm okay with it.
Right, just because I have to play devil's advocate at times, right? How would you feel about the pendulum being swung the other way? If there was radicalized voices in our music, because I don't know, because it wouldn't be something that I would seek out, and it wouldn't be something like. But how would you feel about that? Do you think that is a voice that should have a platform as well as the others, like your side?
You mean like, are you talking about like far right people?
Yeah, I like the people. Like if you imagine your viewpoint and imagine the complete 180 side of it. If there was an opposing, how would you feel about that? Just because it's something that I haven't even written in my questions. It's only purely you've said it, and it feels.
And it is a great question, especially like it's a really good like thought experiment, because there's a couple things that you need to consider there. There's obviously the whole like thing about free speech. Obviously, people can say whatever they feel, but there is also the other half of that, which is that just because you're free to say something doesn't mean you're free of the consequences. And
yeah, I agree.
And like it's in regards to like far right, I'm fine with people's opinions when they're just opinions. Like, oh, I like banana splits and you like hot fudge sundaes. Like that's opinions, and those are fine. For me, as soon as someone's opinion infringes upon the human rights of another person, then I don't really fucking care that it's your opinion. Fuck off. Sit down, shut up. You are actively harming people. And that's like, obviously, like, I'm not going to tell somebody, like, there's no way even for me to, like, even if I wanted to censor someone like that, I couldn't. But, like, I will then respond to that person by going, you need to sit down and shut the fuck up because your words are directly harming, like, people. And that's my, like, litmus test. Is it going to hurt people? No? That's fine. Then feel it, say it, do it, whatever. If it is, fuck no. Like,
yeah. And that's why it's important to have that platform to be able to shout against what you feel to be shouting against. To stick with the face of rock music, because this is my words, not yours. I feel that rock has, for at least a decade, in the eyes of when the mainstream look at what rock is, or what the public face of rock is, like, we have looked not cool, and we have looked stale, and I can understand why the perception of rock as a genre as such is stale and dry. But I look at yourselves, Chelsea Wolfe, Loathe, Gulch, Code Orange, Spirit Box, Knock Loose, Twin Temple. Do you feel both representation and quality within rock music is on the rise? Just one of those things, like, do you think that rock could do with a public facelift? Or what is your take on the what I've just spewed out?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it should have a public facelift, because I think that a lot of our associations, like specifically with the idea of rock music, are just wildly inaccurate. If you say to your average layperson, like, oh, rock band, they're going to imagine a band of like all straight white dudes. And it's a genre that was literally founded on Black people's music. And like specifically, like, a lot of Black women are responsible for rock music. And I think that it is important for people to acknowledge the roots of anything, frankly. Otherwise it verges, it goes into appropriation category. So when you are in a genre and you are acknowledging the fullness of the genre and the full experience of all of the people within the genre, then I think that like we're getting somewhere, which is why representation is so important. But it's funny that you were like, I do believe representation is increasing and getting better. As far as quality, I think it gets just like, for me, that's like a where you look thing. You're going to find things that are amazing in any genre, and you're going to find things that are like derivative and like not specifically interesting. I've noticed like almost like an uptick in both like ends of the spectrum. Like there's a lot of representation, which is amazing. It's getting so much better. Then there's also a lot of people saying that we don't need more, which seems really silly. It's never the people of marginalized groups that are saying, no, don't have more of us there to share our lived experience. No, those aren't the people who have a problem with it.
If I may interject just for a second as well, like I've been obsessed with rock and metal since 1996. Like it's been my entire life since this hit me. And I think that particularly in the modern era of female songwriters within this world, in my 24 years of being obsessed with this music, it is currently in a better state than it has, in my opinion, ever been in. Fucking ever. No matter where you look, punk, hardcore, metal, like there is great female written shit going on across the board. What I wanted to ask about in regards to Sharptooth is your album rips ass. I love it, right? I love it. But I look at the landscape of rock and metal and I go, who's going to take this and run with this? Like who's going to put this on radio? Who's going to play? Where is this video going to go far and wide that is going to see this? Is that a real challenge for Sharptooth? Like your voice heard, because you don't sound like Five Finger Death Punch, and you don't like your album opens by kind of shitting on the scene that we're in a bit. Like it's bold. So like, is that the challenge for Sharptooth to kick that door down? It's a thing I'm so used to that I don't think I have like a specific reaction to it that much anymore. Like I have, like when you are just existing in the world as a woman, you always expect to work twice as hard to get half as far, whether that is as a musician in a band and in a mostly male music scene or in a career. These are experiences that I've just had for my entire life. So that was honestly kind of like an expectation. I was like, yeah, I'm going to have to show up and like put twice as much of like my fucking heart and soul and like practice into this so that I will even be looked at in the same like glance as any of these bands. And it doesn't even necessarily matter if I am like better than if I happen to be like the best vocalist in the world, whatever, it still wouldn't matter because there's that hurdle to get over. And the problem with the hurdle is that a lot of that bias is internalized and it's not a thing that people are actively thinking about. Like most dudes aren't walking around being like, fuck women. Like that's not real. That's not how a lot of sexism actually looks. A lot of it will look like, oh, I just don't like any bands with women in them. Like, I don't like it. I don't like female screamers. All female screamers sound the same. I don't listen to bands that like aren't people who look just like me. Like, or like, oh, none of the bands you listen to have any people of color in them. Like, so it's things like that that you don't think about overtly that are the biases that all of us have. Like, even fucking me. Like, I've had these exact fucking biases that would negatively impact me because that's being socialized to think and feel this way, which is what we all have been, like either through like media and movies and stuff like that.
I do love that lately there has been such a huge push of bands that have femmes in them, and those bands finally getting fucking attention. Especially, I mean, you mentioned like Spirit Box, and Spirit Box has like existed for a few years, and it's like only now in 2020 that I'm hearing people even like bring their name up. And
to be fair, Lauren, Holy Roller is the best song that they've written by a country mile, in my opinion.
Incredible.
In my opinion, yeah, it's fucking outrageous.
I just think that her voice is massive, and I just fucking love it. Like that. So like it's stuff like that, because I mean, you mentioned a whole bunch of bands with women in them. Yeah. And I like defy you to say that they all sound the same, because they don't.
Exactly.
Like we're just people, like dudes are.
Yeah, like, I hear you.
Nobody would say, "Oh, I don't listen to any bands like with men in them." I mean, maybe I would. I don't know. If I was feeling really good, I'd be like, "I'm done. There's men in the band. I don't care anymore."
Yeah. Sunday morning hungover is the time for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the time to go. You know what? I'm done with band. God, that's also, I feel that like on a personal level, and then also on a spiritual level, like, and also on a music level. But like no one would say like that's a thing that we immediately register as being ridiculous, but that we don't necessarily immediately register as being ridiculous when it is referring to women in the same, like in the exact same way. So that's where the bias exists. And until we get better at admitting, literally, that's the biggest thing, is not necessarily calling out the biases, admitting our own, because we all have them. And I'm so fucking sick of people walking around thinking that like they have some kind of like social justice badge where they are like not part of the problem. We are all part of the fucking problem, because we all have internalized biases. If we don't acknowledge them, they don't get fixed. So people can point fingers at other people all they want, but what I want them to be doing is then going home at night and pointing the finger at themselves and going, okay, where have I contributed to rape culture? Where have I been having like feelings of internalized sexism? Where have I said things that maybe like had like kind of a homophobic edge? Like everybody should be doing this all the time. And that's how we fucking get better.
I think it's really important, because I think it's putting this interview out. Like, I have no idea how people are going to respond to this. I've literally no idea. But fuck that, first and foremost, because I admire the ever-loving shit out of any artist that has something to say, let alone someone who stands up brazenly and says some of the things that you've been saying today. I think that it's great what you put forward about looking internally, because I think that this world has so much shouting at one another that, like, ultimately, the look that everyone is going for is, how do we fix this in some way? Like, no one's enjoying this shit, surely. No. So, like,
I think the only people who are like, this is actually fine, are like the fucking billionaires, like up there with their fucking
profiting on it. You know it.
Any other person is like, yeah, this got out of hand.
For real. And Lauren, I can't wait for this world to open up so I can see your band. Now, to my extreme embarrassment, I haven't caught your band yet. So
we haven't been around the world too much, so don't feel
right. Okay, well, I'm in Los Angeles, so I've got absolutely no excuse. We'll see you when the world opens up.
Do people in LA even have free time though? Like, is that a thing?
We make it for good art, mate. We make it.
You know, like, I'm like, I don't even know that y'all have free time. Like,
where's home for you, Lauren? Where are you?
So I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, but I live in Boston, Massachusetts.
Right.
And Boston, I think, is just the greatest fucking city in the universe.
Well, I'll be there next September for Aerosmith's 50th anniversary, because that's a bit of me.
That's awesome.
Lauren,
I will show you all of the best places because I know all of them.
Like and share this video and join me on Twitch every Tuesday, Friday and Saturday for guest hangouts, new music votes, tier lists, band-specific competitions, weekly merch roundups and much, much more. That's twitch.tv/Mosh Talks. Find the link in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and I'll see you on notfest.com for all of the latest news, features and much more from the worlds of rock, metal and beyond.